Welcome to the Indian podcasting revolution, and I'm your host Rohit Kokane. In our newest series, PodPeeps, we pull back the curtains and step behind the microphone with some of the nation's most successful, innovative, and influential self-starter podcasters. From sharing their unique podcast journeys to unearthing their creative processes, PodPeeps is not just about the podcasting, it's about the people, the brave, and visionary individuals who dare to use their voice and change the game. Today we have Abhay Maheshwari, a critically acclaimed storyteller and prominent figure in the Indian digital audio space. With his wide experience and entrepreneurial spirit, Abhay has not only won nationwide podcast recognition but has also inspired countless others to turn their tales into successful podcasts. Today, he is here to share how the magic that unfolds when stories come to life. So, are you ready? Let's tune into the voices of change, the voices of India. Welcome to PodPeeps on the Indian podcasting revolution. Hey, hi, Abhay. Welcome on the Indian podcasting revolution.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you so much for having me.
It is pleasure to host you. So, Abhay, when we are getting started about, I want to know how did your idea of podcasting transform over the period of time? क्योंकि जिस प्रकार से आपने शुरू किया होगा आज अब जिस प्रकार से कर रहे हो there might have been a lot of changes to it. So, what was your initial idea and how did it transform?
So, the initial idea of the podcast, the storytelling podcast, which I host, which is Lal Chashma, that was broadly in my mind. But the reason why I started this was that the podcast is a creative outlet. I never connected that with, in the early days or even today with money or with fame or with listeners. I was like, yeah, there are few thoughts in my mind and it seems I like this. I became more cautious of the quality. I was very particular about the quality of the sound, particularly even from the first episode, because if listeners in podcast, I've realized a very वो बड़ा फूफा जी टाइप एटीट्यूड है कि अगर जरा सा थोड़ा नॉइज आ गई तो मुखर के एकदम चले जाएंगे एंड दे विल probably not come back. So I was very particular about quality. So focus on that continued to increase. Then other things like social media presence. My social media presence was very poor. Like I had like hardly any followers and I was not even active. I am not a very social media friendly kind of person. So the entire ecosystem that supported a podcast growth and the connect with the audience is something that tagged along, and that led to broader kick in this journey that okay, you need to write a post, you need to thank people, and there's a you have to be part of the ecosystem, connect with others. And I learned a lot over the years from a lot of people like yourself who I've met in person and online, and adopted some of their ideas and they also helped me with feedback. तो आई थिंक वो एक अच्छी जर्नी रही है जिसमें मिक्स ऑफ पैशन क्रिएटिविटी एंड फीडबैक पुट टुगेदर. I think it has evolved. And now, like I was telling you before our conversation, that I'm thinking that, okay, with this podcast, can I take this skill, elsewhere? While I am a management consultant, or basically I have a day job right now, can I work more on this? So I try to use my weekends to not just write stories on my show, but pick up some, ad hoc narration projects or some voiceover projects, whatever I can do in my capacity. Because this is something I like. So I was like, why not step into the industry and pick something else? Considering that audio itself is growing. So that is probably a quick gist and summary of the journey that has been so far.
Interesting, Abhay. So, in Abhay, you do have a day job. So, how did this idea of podcasting came to your mind? Like, कि किसने push किया था? मतलब क्या वो फूफा जी थे कि आप कुछ करते नहीं जिंदगी में तो कुछ ऐसा भी करो?
हमारी जिंदगी में फूफा जी नहीं थे यार, हम ही वो अपनी जिंदगी के फूफा जी थे. हुआ क्या है कि सी आई वाज नेवर outspoken public speaking sort of a personality, right? I was very reserved with my thoughts, would speak well and good in front of my friends, but I wouldn't call myself as an introvert and neither as a outspoken extrovert. Somewhere in between, like an aspiring extrovert, वैसा था. I would want to be able to communicate and speak better. So 7 8 years ago, I started formally training myself into public speaking, and that led to me being exposed to storytelling. So I realized that okay, public speaking is talking about presentations, powerpoints, and giving speeches or hosting or anchoring. Storytelling is picking a moment of your life or creating fictional characters and telling a story to an audience in an engaging manner. Then one day, just before the pandemic, like 2020, like there was a workshop organized by Spotify in Spoken Fest. Spoken is a spoken word festival that is organized by a group called a storytelling collective called Commune. And this was in Mumbai. I'm based out of Pune, so I went and attended it, and I was fascinated by okay, there's something called as podcast. Okay, what it is, how you make it, things like that. Why it attracted me was because a lot of times when I went for these storytelling or public speaking events, a lot of people would come back and say, कि यार आपकी आवाज बहुत अच्छी, like you have a very solid voice and all. Now, growing up as a middle class kid, you know, I was never used to that appreciation. I never heard that appreciation from my own parents. So when it came from outside, it took me some time to process it, but I took it with a pinch of salt that, okay, there might be something which I can do. So I just started, if through that workshop that was there, and they were just giving some basic intro of how you can build your podcast, what it is, and things like that. And I was like, "ठीक है यार, I have some bank of 4 or 5 stories I did over the years. Why don't I just record them and just upload them?" And I didn't overthink it a lot. Like I just have recorded on my phone. I just released it, and I like, "ठीक है, I was enjoying the process actually, Rohit, because at that time back, like just before COVID, there was a lot of construction activity that would happen next to my house. So there was no good time for me in the day after my work to actually record it. Weekend पे भी वो धक 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 बजता था, and weekday पे भी मेरे घर पहुंचने के बाद वो रात भर चलता था. Somehow they had permission to like
Right.
drill the world and drill the earth throughout the day. So I was like, where will I record it? So, I would write the script on Saturday, and then Sunday morning or afternoon, I would come to my office, which is about like 10 kilometers away from my house. And I would sit in my boss's cabin, which is soundproof and all, and I would record it on the phone. And I would then head back and I would just upload it. So it was simply this idea that somebody said you can record audio. And then the thrill of this going over the office and, चुपके चुपके बनाना, गार्ड भी सोच रहा है कि ये भाई साहब क्या कर रहे हैं संडे को, ऑफिस तो बंद है. This thrill was fun. It made me feel alive. So the concept was introduced merely like, let's say, in a workshop, but it continued and I pursued it because I loved that thrill. Of course, अब वो COVID आ गया तो फिर offices बंद हो गए. But then the world also shut down, right? So I then started producing things in my home. But that is how the podcasting origin happened.
इंटरेस्टिंग है एंड एवरीवन शुड बी रिलेटिंग टू इट लाइक कि कितनी मेहनत करी है मतलब कि वो अगर करने की इच्छा होती है ना तो आदमी कैसे भी कर लेता है दैट इज माय ओपिनियन इवन आई स्टार्टेड विद द सेम एंथुजियाज्म लाइक लेट्स डू इट आई डोंट कम फ्रॉम अ मीडिया बैकग्राउंड तो मेरे लिए भी ऐसे ही था कि यार वो कैसे बोलते हैं या फिर मैं भी मोबाइल फ़ोन से ही रिकॉर्ड करता था द रूम आई एम सिटिंग राइट नाउ इज इन टू द ऑफिस इटसेल्फ तो ये कहते हैं ना कि छोटी सी रूम थी एंड उसमें से वो सारी चीज़ें शुरुआत की मैंने बट अगेन काफ़ी खामियाँ थी उसमें मतलब कि यार कैसी अब जब मैं पहला एपिसोड सुनता हूँ तो ऐसा लगता है कि यार इसने पॉडकास्ट नहीं करना चाहिए सो सो दैट वाज द काइंड ऑफ जर्नी एंड अगेन एज यू सेड कि वो सारी चीजें आपको मेहनत करनी पड़ती है यू वर टू एंथुसियास्टिक अबाउट इट यू वांटेड टू डू समथिंग और लाइक एक्सप्लोर दैट पर्टिकुलर मीडियम that is how the person grows into this medium and the happiness of getting your name onto say like Spotify or something the apps that we tune into for listening to the podcast is something amazing like people do search for द फेमस पर्सनालिटीज द सिंगर्स वगैरह तो ऐसे ही पॉडकास्टर्स को भी हम सर्च करते हैं एंड हैविंग आवर पॉडकास्ट इज अगेन काइंड ऑफ कहते हैं ना कि वो रैंकिंग में आ जाता है या फिर सारी चीज़ें तो इट गिव्स यू काइंड ऑफ अ डिफरेंट फीलिंग तो ग्रेट टू नो अबाउट दैट एंड यू डिड मेंशन अबाउट स्टोरी टेलिंग सो यू बीइंग अ स्टोरी टेलर व्हाट्स योर वे ऑफ क्रिएटिंग लाइक कैप्टिवेटिंग स्टोरीज आप उसको पॉडकास्ट में कैसे एम्बेड करते हो क्या है वो प्रोसेस
सो टू बी ऑनेस्ट, ऐसा कोई प्रोसेस तो नहीं है. आई थिंक ये सवाल मेरे से कई बार लोगों ने पूछा है, क्योंकि मैं ना बचपन से राइटर नहीं था. आई वाज नॉट अ राइटर एज अ किड. देयर आर सम पीपल हु हैव बीन राइटिंग एंड स्क्रिबलिंग पोएट्री एंड स्टोरीज एंड शायरी at the back of their notebooks and all of that. I was not that kind. In fact, I was very far away from literature, like up until, like I said, 7 8 years ago. I was very far away. Like even in college, never did a lot of it. So I think didn't have a process to go about it. And neither, to be very honest, like when I started a little bit of storytelling, I didn't think that, okay, I have to go and pick up some DIY cheat sheets or some frameworks. Kuch nahi. One thing that I got as a feedback and like a compliment, I would say, was the office gossips and conversations in the canteen during lunch. They were pretty organic, and I realized, यार, that's what how I like to tell. Like, दोस्त को कैसे सुनाऊंगा कि यार आज दिन में ऐसा हुआ, पता है, फिर ना गड्ढे में गिर गया, गड्ढे से बाहर कैसे आया. मेरा सिर्फ उतना इंटेंट था कि a story which is my style, which is basically how I would tell it to a friend. Even when I record it, I imagine that my friend is sitting right in front of me, and I'm trying to imagine people in front of me. Although it's a studio setup now, but मैं imagine करता हूँ कि यार लोग बैठे हुए हैं, कि मैं उनको सुना रहा हूँ कि पता है ऐसा हुआ, फिर ऐसा हुआ, with the voice modulation, things like that, and all of that put together. But the writing process starts with an idea. An idea could, typically could be anything inspired from my own life. So I noticed that I am an observer. Like I said, I had a lot of thoughts, but I didn't know how to let them out. So those thoughts, I started putting them in on paper, right? I would, let's say, if I see something startling कि अच्छा देखा कि अच्छा ये व्यक्ति ऐसे बिहेव कर रहा है, तो अब आप मैं इसको एज अ प्रॉम्प्ट लिख लेता था, और फिर जब मुझे कोई एक एक किस्सा ऐसा लगता था कि हाँ यार, ये इसको हम जिंदगी से जोड़ सकते हैं, एंड विदाउट बीइंग प्रीची, माय गोल वाज नॉट टू प्रीच टू पीपल, नॉट टू हैव दी स्टोरीज a moral lesson to it. Although I've always felt that the story should communicate a positive message, it may or may not be moral. There should not be any moral. जरूरी नहीं है कि उसमें कुछ सीख ही हो. आप बस उसको सुन के फील गुड कर सकते हैं कि नहीं यार, हाँ यार, सुन के अच्छा लगा, चलो तो एंड जैसे जैसे लोगों का एक फीडबैक आया, तो मुझे लगा रिलेटेबिलिटी है यार लोगों में, तो कहानी को मैं जितना कोलोक्यूअल टर्म्स में या जितना आम भाषा में मैं लिख सकूं, वो मेरा एक जरिया बन गया कि, और उससे क्या हुआ कि फिर दैट बिकेम इवन बेटर फॉर मी, बिकॉज हिंदी इज माय नेटिव लैंग्वेज, इट्स माय मदर टंग. तो मैं फिर हिंदी में ही कम्युनिकेट करने लगा. मैंने कहा यार, अब तो इट इज लिटरली लाइक कि अगर मैं अपने दोस्त को हिंदी में बता रहा हूँ कि भाई सुन, ऐसा हुआ, मैं उठा और मैं ये गया, मैं वो गया, एंड उस लहजे में मैंने कहानी बिल्ड कर. एंड फिर धीरे-धीरे कुछ-कुछ फ्रेमवर्क्स भी मैंने पढ़े, समझे, द 5 पैरा अप्रोच, और लेट्स से द 3 पैरा अप्रोच, कि भाई हाउ डू यू रियली सेट अ बैकग्राउंड और हाउ यू सेट अ कॉन्टेक्स्ट. तो कुछ नेचुरल था कि एक अपना तरीका, कि अगर वो सेम किस्सा मैं किसी दोस्त को सुनाता तो कैसे सुनाता. एंड उस ड्राफ्ट को लिखने के बाद, आफ्टर राइटिंग दैट ड्राफ्ट, आई वुड then ask my question, okay, where are the peak points, where are the inflections, where is the hook, or where is the is the message coming out the way I should be. Some stories I have genuinely wanted to bring a little bit of, let's say, religious harmony, or a little bit around, satire into the story. So is that really coming out well or not? So then those were the elements which over a period of time I learned. Of course, I listened to a lot of stories. I tried to translate, what good cinema, like good cinema storytelling is a mix of cinematography as well as script. So I would watch a lot and I see कि oh अच्छा, like इनको मैं audio में कैसे convert कर सकता हूँ, what are the visual metaphors, the references which I can bring. So it was more experiential, it was less theoretical, based on my experience, and mostly experiential, picking up things from my surroundings and then putting them together and just making sure कि यार at the end, मतलब वो कोई एकदम fancy कहानी ना बन जाए, डाइजेस्टेबल होनी चाहिए, हाँ. और मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंटली, लाइक आफ्टर आई प्रोड्यूस द स्टोरी, और आई लाइक राइट द फर्स्ट ड्राफ्ट एटलीस्ट, आई रिकॉर्डेड, लाइक आई डू अ वेरी रफ रिकॉर्डिंग. वो रफ रिकॉर्डिंग में मैं वो कहानी दो अपने आप को सुनता हूँ. तो अगर मुझे ही पसंद नहीं आती तो मैं छोड़ देता हूँ, राइट. सो आई सॉ दिस मीम समवेयर द अदर डे वेयर इट सेज दैट आई मेक द कंटेंट फॉर ओनली वन ऑडियंस, व्हिच इज मी. सो समवेयर आई फर्स्ट मेक श्योर दैट जो कहानी मैंने लिखी है वो मुझे मजा आना चाहिए, या जो फीलिंग मैं उसमें दिखाना चाहता हूँ, अगर वो फील मुझे नहीं आई तो शायद ऑडियंस को नहीं आएगी. एंड मे बी समटाइम्स दैट मेक्स मी अ लिटिल ओवर क्रिटिकल इन द प्रोसेस, बट आई थिंक दैट हैज समवेयर बीन लाइक माई क्वालिटी अश्योरेंस सॉर्ट ऑफ चेक वॉल, कि हाँ यार, मतलब थोड़ा ओवरडू कर दो चलेगा, लेकिन अंडरडू नहीं करना. मतलब आदमी चाहे एक कहानी सुने कि दो सुने कि आधा सुने, वो क्वालिटी उसे मिलनी चाहिए इन टर्म्स ऑफ द ऑडियो एंड ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ टेक्निकल हाइजीन, एज वेल एज कि हाँ, मतलब अगर उसने 3 मिनट भी सुना 8 मिनट की कहानी में, तो दैट पर्सन शुड बी लाइक, yeah, there's good use of vocab. The feedback should be consistent. So somewhere I draft and keep those things in mind, and these are all the things I picked up on the go. मैं भी आपकी तरह मैं भी मीडिया बैकग्राउंड से नहीं आता हूँ, तो ये चीजें धीरे धीरे सीख ली कि अच्छा यार, एक अच्छी ग्रिपिंग कहानी या किस्सा लोगों को कैसे सुनाया जाता है, तो वो धीरे धीरे पिक कर लिया.
एब्सोल्युटली ग्रेट। अभय, मतलब कि आई कुड रिलेट टू दैट पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट कि जैसे वो होता है ना कि जब हम कोई गाड़ी खरीदते हैं तो वो प्री डिलीवरी इंस्पेक्शन होता है। सो इन द सेम वे यू डिड दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग विथ योर पॉडकास्ट कि डिलीवरी करने के पहले, पब्लिश करने के पहले क्या-क्या चीज़ें दिमाग में रखनी है, किन सारी चीज़ों को मतलब कहते हैं ना कि उसमें ख़्याल रखना चाहिए उन सारी चीज़ों का। तो इट गेट्स लॉट ईज़ियर लाइक कि हाउ यू आर फीलिंग एंड दैट इज़ वेरी ट्रू। मतलब वो मीम की तरह है, बट देन अगेन इफ यू आर नॉट लाइकिंग इट, मे बी द ऑडियंस वोंट बी एबल टू रिलेट टू दैट। बट अगेन माय क्वेश्चन कम्स बैक टू इट लाइक कि हम सारी चीज़ें करते हैं, यू फाइंड इट रिलेटेबल टू योरसेल्फ कि दैट इज़ द स्टोरी, यू आर लाइकिंग इट, यू वुड बी loving the process of writing that particular story and then recording it. But then how do you define that, or how do you arrive at a kind of a decision that कि ये लोगों को भी पसंद आएगी?
So, to be very honest and frank, I don't think too much about that. आई थिंक उस तरह पिक किया है मैंने कि जो एक नेचुरल, और क्योंकि मैं फोर्स नहीं कर रहा ना, आई एम नॉट फोर्सिंग इट. I'm not trying to put things in a framework, or I'm not saying that, okay, this is the success model, or no. I'm simply saying I enjoy it, and the audience somehow is enjoying with me. And that's the, faith I am moving ahead with. So first I created for myself, because मुझे पता है कि अगर मैं उस स्क्रिप्ट से कन्विंस नहीं हूँ कि आई वांट टू राइट दिस स्टोरी, और आई वांट टू कॉल दिस थिंग एज दिस वे, the audience will sense it. No, podcasting is such an intimate medium, right? Whatever we speak, they'll immediately sense it, like, in their ears. So for me, it has always been like that. I keep everything aside. I first say that my first draft will be about if I like it, and then and then I bring in the audience inspection checklist. And over there also, I have somehow now learned where not to be overcritical, where you need to be critical, and what things you have to keep in mind. But I think the biggest thing that I try not to go away and sway away from is genuineness. The audience, I think, somehow connects with me because वो कहानियां तो अपने आप में जेन्युइन है, बट उनको स्टिच करने का, उनके एग्जांपल्स, उसके एनालॉजीज, मेटाफर्स, एवरीथिंग इज वेरी नॉर्मल. लाइक आई एम नॉट ट्राइंग टू अननेसेसरी मेक इट कॉम्प्लिकेटेड, राइट? लाइक सपोज अगर कोई सिंपल सी बात बोलनी है कि भाई ये चीज मुश्किल है, तो मैं नहीं कह रहा यार अननेसेसरी, मतलब जहां जरूरत नहीं है वहां मैं नहीं कह रहा कि उंगली टेढ़ी करके घी निकालिए. अरे आई एम सिंपली सेइंग दैट थिंग इज डिफिकल्ट, लेट्स ट्राई सम अदर वे. सो I'm keeping it relatable. That's why the difference, and that's why the thing is that I call it spoken word Hindi. तो आम भाषा में जिस तरह आप हिंदी बोलेंगे, उसको मैंने थोड़ा सा polish kiya hai, rather than just simply going into the levels of extremely high, and then I just completely bounce off the head of my audience. No, I don't have any intent of that. So वो relatability I think कहीं ना कहीं अपने आप लोग ढूंढ लेते हैं, और थोड़ा मैं उसको, क्योंकि मैं enjoy करता हूँ और मैं उसको उस तरह से कहता हूँ जिस तरह से I will try to narrate a story and a anecdote to my friends. I think वो कहीं ना कहीं automatically हो जाता है. So I don't have a direct answer, sorry, for this question. There is no formula, there is no funda. Somewhere I think there is an organic connection. Like people like it. There have been instances where I was not happy with the story that I released. So after 6 months of releasing the story, when I finally got some time, I went and re-edited the draft, and I was like, "नहीं, मेरे को edit करना है." Like now the same story everybody has said, like they have given 5 stars and they're like, "Oh, this is wonderful." And I totally am humbled by that, and I really respect that piece. But in inside me, it is like, no, मैं इसको थोड़ा better बनाता हूँ. रुको, I'll change it. I'll package it a little better, because at that time I was not able to incorporate it because of XYZ reasons. So can I make it a little better? So I think the origin, the genesis of the writing is because of my creative process. I think that's where the genuineness comes out, and that's where it शायद automatically connects with people.
Hey, that's good. Like when you have this kind of organic approach, you feel comfortable while doing that. क्योंकि हमेशा बहुत सी सारी बातें होती कि यू नीड अ काइंड ऑफ स्पेसिफिक अप्रोच, इफ यू नीड अ काइंड ऑफ स्ट्रेटेजी, इनको टारगेट करो, इन जोग्राफीज को, डेमोग्राफिक्स को वगैरह, वो सारी चीज़ें होती है. बट देन अगेन व्हेन यू डोंट केयर अ लॉट अबाउट इट, तो आपका जो जेन्युइननेस होता है वो स्टोरी बताने का, वो बढ़ जाता है. एंड दैट इज हाउ पीपल स्टार्ट रिलेटिंग टू इट, एंड देन इट यू स्टार्ट एंजॉयिंग इट.
Absolutely. And I have certain principles in the sense that I will, certain topics and themes I will never touch upon, or, talk too much about it, because that's not my goal. Like in general, also in my life, I am not somebody who immediately is like a fear mongering person या फिर immediate hater है. मैं बहुत calm composed आदमी हूँ यार. मतलब अगर किसी ने, तुम आगे मेरे को बोलते हो कि अरे पता है ऐसा XYZ हुआ, तो I will not immediately look and run away with you. अरे क्या हुआ क्या? I mean, I'm curious, but I will use my brain. I will stay calm. So I think that's the tonality I try to maintain and try to refrain from controversial topics. I think if the audience wanted controversial topics, then I mean there is enough content already out there. So my goal is not to unnecessarily touch upon viral topics and trends and ये वो. नहीं है, मतलब उस सब के लिए there is already a lot of content out there, and I think because the first audience is me, I am making it first for me. I try to say that, okay, if I'm creating a story about my father, let's say, or me and something happened, let's say me and my father, we had a fight, and how he was trying to mend the relation, so I write it that way. मेरे दिमाग में थॉट ही नहीं आता यार वो कि कौन सी ज्योग्राफी के कौन सा है. आई राइट इट कि यार दुनिया में कोई भी ज्योग्राफी, कोई भी भाषा, कोई भी देश, एक फादर एंड चाइल्ड रिलेशन इज द सेम, right? It will always be the same. So I just simply visualize my situation, my scenario, and like I call it, it's where that these stories are inspired by my real life, sprinkled with fiction to make it relatable for everybody. एक और जो इसका मुझे किसी ने एक बहुत बढ़िया फीडबैक दिया था, लाइक व्हेन आई अर्ली इन माय डेज, जब कोई कहानी लिखता है तो आप कैरेक्टर को नाम देते हो, राकेश, संतोष, हसन, कुछ नाम देते हो आप. In my stories you will see it is me, मैं. तो मैं सड़क पे जा रहा था और मैं ही गिर गया तो पापा को फोन लगाया. नाउ इट डजंट मैटर कि ये मैं रश्मि थी कि राकेश था, यू नो. तो आई थिंक सम ऑफ these things have also, I think, somehow contributed in making it more consumable and relatable to everybody.
इंटरेस्टिंग लर्निंग है अभय, मतलब कि इससे सीखने को मिलता है. दिस इज समथिंग दैट यू हैव टू डू इट इन अ वेरी यूनिक वे, एंड इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस काइंड ऑफ अ क्रक्स, देन दी again recording process, writing process becomes more easier, and you start enjoying that particular medium, so that people try to resonate with the kind of story that you are telling through your podcast. Great one. Now moving ahead, Abhay, you have been like forging, or you have worked with a lot of brands like GeoSava and Sureway, etc. So, what was your approach towards forging those kind of partnerships? And if people who are starting out, who are doing well, want to create those kind of partnerships, or like have that kind of strategic alignment with them, so what could be the process for them?
So first and foremost is to shed off your ego, right? Because somewhere I am not fully sold in the creator economy. You know, this message is there that, okay, you are an artist, you should be paid. Agreed. I am not against artists not being paid, but you have just started. There is no proof in the market about the value of a product, right? And my experience in the creative industry so far, and this is just my, as an outsider who has stepped into as a freelancer and worked with few brands, I feel the value is defined here with each work, right? So you can't just go and say, oh, my painting is worth 3,000. Why is it 3,000? And when somebody says that, why is it 3,000, you know, artists take offense to it. No. I mean, if you work in a corporate setting and you go to a client and say, okay, give me $3,000 for this project, the one who's paying has the full right to say what is the ROI of it, what is the basis of it. So I think somewhere, you have to remove your ego when you go to brands, and you have to go with the approach that you're here to learn, right? Like, I don't know, like I have a management consulting background, and I have a lot of experience in business development as my day job. So yet, despite all of that, because this is a new industry for me, the media, I stepped with caution. I was like, okay, I don't know what is the ROI you are expecting, because I work in a very different setting as a day job where the ROI is completely different, where they want something else. वहाँ पे analytics करके deliverable देना होता है. यहाँ तुम कुछ और कर दोगे. Plus, over there is a team, and the company name is at stake. Here it is me at stake. So from a group and organization, you are moving to an individual. So despite having the experience, I approached with caution, and I kept my ego aside, and I said, fine, you tell me how much you're going to pay, right? Let me start with that, because as an outsider I didn't know how much to be paid for. So I started with that. When you also go to the market, आप कहते हो जी मैं 1 किलो की दाल दे दीजिए, उसके बदले में 100 रुपए लूंगा, right? अगर if you were so insensitive to pricing, then why is everybody worrying about के पेट्रोल के दाम बढ़ गए, right? There is a concept of money, right? And I pay some money, I get something in return. So approaching brands is about keeping that ego aside and keeping the first thing in mind, which is your learning. If you are an established media person, fine, you have the credibility to go and ask. If you are not, and if you're just starting, keep your ego aside, approach people. Whatever they give you, take that as a learning opportunity. एक नेगोशिएशन फेज इतना लंबा फेज होता है ना रोहित, मतलब तुम तो जानते ही हो, लाइक उस फेज को समझो यार, उसको एक्सपीरियंस करो. एंड ऐसा नहीं होगा कि अरे मेरे पास तो इतने लिसनर्स हैं, यू कम. नो, ही माइट आस्क यू 10 metrics and he will not be still convinced. You might have the best metrics and he will still not be convinced. You might have the best material, he'll still not be convinced, right? So in the process of getting a sponsor, enjoy that process and understand that process, instead of just worrying about कि यार मेरे को 100 रुपए की जगह 50 रुपए क्यों मिले and all of that. I mean that once you get the hang of the process, I'm telling you, you can convert that 100 to 1,000, in a much shorter duration. But अगर तुम्हें process ही समझ नहीं आया और तुम ego ही हमेशा बीच में लेके आ गए, you will never learn how to spot opportunities.
Exactly. That is the process. Like whenever I approach, whenever I get the kind of a paid opportunity, is more about like, ki, am I benefiting from it? Like how I can get better at it with providing value to the other person as well. ताकि उनके लिए भी वो आसान हो जाता है. We are able to crack those particular deals. It creates a kind of a portfolio for you as well. कि हाँ हमने ये किया है, and you can sell it better the next time. तो इन सारी चीज़ों से वो काफ़ी एक प्रोसेस यूजुअल हो जाता है. एंड यू राइटली सेड, ईगो नहीं आना चाहिए. द नेगोशिएशन शुड हैपन इन अ वेरी सटल वे, सो दैट नो वन इज पुलिंग ईच अदर. मतलब कि कहते हैं ना, वो खींचातानी नहीं होनी चाहिए. यू जस्ट हैव अ यूजुअल कन्वर्सेशन, सी व्हाट बेस्ट यू कैन ऑफर, व्हाट बेस्ट they can get from your kind of offer that you are putting onto the table. So that is the usual process one must follow.
Yeah, and I'll add that जैसे आप अगर मार्केट में से दूर खड़े हो, जैसे सब्जी मंडी में सामान बिकता है ना, इमेजिन योरसेल्फ एज़ दैट वेजिटेबल. If you are sitting at home in somebody's freezer, you have no value. The minute you are in the mandi, right? The minute you are in the market, that is when you will know and decide that what is the value of you as a vegetable. I mean, that's a very bad example, sorry, but I mean, तुम्हारी वैल्यू क्या है? वो तभी आएगी जब तुम मार्केट में आओगे. लेकिन अगर तुम उसके डर से कि भाई मैं या ईगो से तुम मार्केट में ही नहीं आए कभी, तो तुम्हें पता ही नहीं चलेगा कि तुम 1000 के थे, तुम 1 लाख के थे कि 10 लाख के थे. Right, and this is part of the game, right? This is just life in general, that somebody has the luxury to do it. Fair enough. I didn't have that. I still don't have that. And I approach this thing with with respect and caution. When somebody comes to me today and talks about anything, I'm always respectful, and I make sure I keep my ego aside. Even if it is not a sponsored deal and somebody just wants to invite me for something, I'm still humble, and I maintain that, like, and I really hope, touchwood, that I continue to do so ahead also, that I keep my ego aside. Ego will destroy you before anything else. So just keep the ego aside.
Yeah, because then when people start with their own show, तो उनके पास ऐसे होता है कि दे हैव दिस कॉमन नोशन कि आई डोंट हैव द नंबर्स, आई डोंट हैव द ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ लिसनर बेस, या फिर आई एम नॉट एबल टू टारगेट दैट, मेरे पास अभी 10 एपिसोड नहीं हुए हैं, आई एम नॉट श्योर अबाउट हाउ आई विल बी गेटिंग टू दोज काइंड ऑफ नंबर्स. बट यू जस्ट हैव टू रिमेंबर दैट कि जैसे टमाटर के दिन आ गए तो आप वो टमाटर बन के आ जाओ मार्केट में, ताकि आप उस प्रोसेस को एन्जॉय कर पाओगे, आपकी भी वैल्यू आपको समझ में आएगी. एंड अगेन वो वैल्यू मिलती है. Once you keep doing more of it, then you'll be able to define your own value, and then you'll be able to see कि हाँ, कैसे किया जा सकता है, how you can improve into that particular journey of your podcasting, and वो शो को भी बेहतर बनाते जाएगा फिर. That is the approach that I follow. तो did any time into your podcasting journey ऐसे कुछ challenges आए थे कि जिसने, कहते हैं ना कि वो थोड़ा जीना हराम टाइप कर दिया शो को चलाने में, या फिर ऐसे कुछ ग्रो करने में, ऐसा कुछ फेज था? या फिर कभी-कभी स्टैग्नेशन भी आ जाता है, द वे यू आर वांटिंग इट टू ग्रो वो नहीं हो पाता है, एंड देन सडनली इट पिक्स अप फ्रॉम दैट पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट. और फिर कभी किसी ने ऐसे कुछ क्रिटिकल फीडबैक दिया था आपको कि उस पे सच पे काम करके उसको इम्प्रूव करके फिर उसको प्रूव करके दिखाया?
हुए हैं यार ऐसे तो, आई थिंक बहुत अनगिनत. एवरी आई थिंक एवरी ऑल्टरनेट डे आई कीप थिंकिंग अबाउट माय चॉइसेस कि भाई यहाँ कहाँ पैर रख दिया, मतलब वैसा है. Because I keep reminding myself, and I'm repeating this. You can count it, put a counter somewhere, Rohit, in the podcast, that I I am doing it because I like it. मैं अपने पापा को नहीं प्रूव करना चाहता, या पड़ोसी को नहीं प्रूव करना चाहता, या फूफा को नहीं प्रूव करना चाहता यार. मतलब क्या करूंगा मैं प्रूव करके? लाइक इफ आई हैव टू प्रूव देम, आई हैव ऑलरेडी प्रूव देम विद द जॉब एंड एवरीथिंग एल्स. इफ आई हैव टू, एक चीज जैसे, a lot of people come to me also, they say कि इससे पैसा मिलेगा क्या? मैं कहता हूँ यार, मिल भी सकता है, नहीं मिल सकता, चालू करो तब पता चलेगा. बट मैं अपने आप से कहता हूँ कि यार, आई हैव अ जॉब सो फार, सो आई एम अर्निंग फ्रॉम देयर, एंड आई एम पुटिंग ऑल द स्ट्रेस थ्रू दैट. देन कोई तो एक चीज ऐसी होनी चाहिए ना लाइफ में, जो मैं अपने लिए कर रहा हूँ, जो मैं पैसे के लिए नहीं कर रहा, जो मैं किसी को दिखाने के लिए नहीं कर रहा यार. मतलब मुझे मुझे इसमें मजा आता है, ठीक है. लाइक आई विल गो अपफ्रंट एंड से दैट इट इज 10:40 PM राइट नाउ on a Thursday night, guys, whosoever is listening, that both Rohit and me are recording this, right? We are not doing this because somebody put a gun to our head. We like it. That's why we are up. Like, मैं अपने ऑफिस से रिकॉर्ड कर रहा हूँ बिकॉज मैं घर ही नहीं गया, एंड रोहित अपने ऑफिस, घर से ऑफिस आ गया कि यार वहां से रिकॉर्ड करते हैं. तो दिस इज पैशन. सो डूइंग इट फॉर पैशन, आई थिंक दैट इज द बिगेस्ट थिंग. अब पॉडकास्टिंग को परस्यू किया तो उसका प्राइस क्या था कि यार, अब जैसे आज अगर मेरे को कोई डिनर पे बुलाता तो मैं मना करता कि नहीं यार, आई हैव अ रिकॉर्डिंग शेड्यूल विद रोहित, ठीक है. कल मेरे को वीकेंड पे कोई बुलाएगा, मैं बोलूंगा नहीं यार, आई हैव अनदर अपॉर्चुनिटी, आई हैव टू वर्क ऑन दैट. So the price is a little bit I lost on the socializing piece, right? But at the same time, I also realized who's my true friend. So I wouldn't call that as a price or a loss per se, right? Because मेरे जो सच्चे दोस्त हैं ना, पिछले जब से मैंने पॉडकास्टिंग करी है, वो तो मेरे को धक्के मारते हैं. मैं मुंबई गया, मैं बैठा हुआ, मैं आलस मार रहा हूँ कि अरे यार मैं नहीं जा रहा यहाँ पे. वो मेरा दोस्त मेरे को धक्के मार रहा है, वो मेरे को पुश कर रहा है कि why are you not going? What will you do by roaming around Mumbai local and Mumbai, city with me? So you if you try to look at the world in both ways, you get both pros and cons of things. And creative block is a very big challenge because I'm making a more creative podcast, slightly more creative in the sense that I have to create a story, right? It's not a conversation or it's not a monologue. So for me, everything has to come from internal creativity. So I'll give you this example. This was back in 2021. I was highly drenched, COVID period. I'm working also, and then after 14, 15 hours of work, I'm trying to keep up with some podcasting schedule and trying to be part of the ecosystem. And I gave up one day. Like I still remember it was Tuesday evening. मैं सो गया 5 बजे. अब ऑफिस में ईमेल डाल दिया. I'm tired and I'm massive headache. And I was constantly thinking that this has to stop. यार, you cannot burn the midnight oil on both ends. जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं ना, दो नाव की सवारी. यहाँ 10 नाव की सवारी चल रही है पिछले 4 साल से. राइट, कभी ये आ गया, कभी वो आ गया. अब मैं मना भी नहीं कर रहा क्योंकि मुझे करना भी है, लेकिन उसका फिर प्राइस ये है कि हेल्थ है या ये है. That was the first time I realized, oh God, somebody sitting in some corner of the country just heard my podcast and they got moved to this level. Okay, and that it prompted them to really send a voice note back to their son, and the son is forwarding it to me. And I'm like, I have like spoken word has immense potential power, यार. So वहीं से मुझे realize हुआ. तो going back to the previous question also, रोहित, ना कि audience को क्या पसंद क्या नहीं, मतलब ऐसे instances हुए हैं जहां मुझे realize हुआ कि यार पसंद नापसंद अपनी जगह है. मुझे ये तो पता चल गया क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. राइट, कि जैसे मैं अपने मेरी किसी भी स्टोरी जो है, दे आर ऑल फैमिली फ्रेंडली स्टोरीज. Never ever you will hear me using any kind of curse word, right? Because the moment I start realizing, मेरा सबसे youngest listener 11 साल का लड़का है यार. I got to know that like about 7, 8 months ago, and I was like, no, I cannot put content which is like explicit, because I don't know who's listening, and mine is a slice of life story. So that audio message just changed my mind. So I've had, fortunately, every single time, like ये इसे आप इत्तेफाक कह लो या भगवान की मैसेजिंग कह लो, कुछ भी कह लो, लाइक आई सेड ना, वो मोमेंट हर तीसरे दिन आ जाता है कि बंद करो इसे, ये बुरा बिस्तर बांधो, सिंपल लाइफ जियो बिना च्युइंगम की तरह स्ट्रेच हुए. At that moment, something or the other happens, and I get a testimonial from a listener. In fact, yesterday also I got it. And day before I was like, boss, मैं थक चुका हूँ. Like I'm too tired. I cannot juggle everything, personal life, professional life, then this creative life. It's becoming too much. And yesterday that message pops up at 12 o'clock in the night. I get up in the morning today and I see that and I'm like, nahi karenge. So the fuel are these messages. The fuel are these messages. At the same time, I am cognizant because I've went through those down phases where there is no message also. But at that time, I use these old messages and I look at them and I be like, नहीं यार, कुछ तो कर रहा हूँ मैं शायद, जो शायद लोगों को पसंद है. और एंड ये एक एक मोटिवेशन, थोड़ी एक्सटर्नल मोटिवेशन, थोड़ी इंटरनल मोटिवेशन उसको फ्यूल करती रहती
Definitely, this point should be highlighted because we need some kind of a motivation. We need some kind of words that appreciates us. जो भी compliment मिलती है, अच्छी हो बुरी हो, it just keeps us on to that particular track of improvement. कि आप जिस प्रकार से भी काम कर रहे हो यार, वो एक मौका मिल जाता है कि आप इम्प्रूव करो एंड देन पुट आउट दैट पर्टिकुलर वर्ड टू द ऑडियंस. एंड एज यू सेड, लाइक कि 11 साल का अगर कोई लड़का सुन रहा है आपको, तो इट बिकम्स योर मॉरल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी एंड द ड्यूटी टू प्रोवाइड दैट पर्टिकुलर काइंड ऑफ अ कंटेंट इनटू दैट पर्टिकुलर वे. कि शायद वो 11 नहीं, अभी और शायद 10 साल वाला भी सुन ले, 9 साल वाला भी सुन ले. सो इट बिकम्स दैट पर्टिकुलर वे. या जो भी करो आप, मतलब उसको फन वे में करो, एन्जॉय करके करो. एंड इफ इट इज कीपिंग यू अलाइव, जो क्रिएटिव जूस होता है आपका, अगर वो फ्लो हो रहा है, तो देन certainly this is the kind of a medium, podcasting is such a kind of a medium that will keep you like onto that particular track कि यार चलो कुछ करते हैं, कुछ बढ़िया सा एक स्टोरी सुनाते हैं, या फिर जिस भी डोमेन में, जिस भी जॉनरा में आप करना चाहते हो कर सकते हो. So that is the aura of this particular medium is what I feel.
है. Absolutely, you summarized it perfectly. Yes.
Yep. So, Abhay, now moving ahead with the kind of like you have the kind of a show, you have the audience. So, for you, how important is community, like having that particular community of the people for your show? क्योंकि बहुत से बार हमने देखा है कि हमें हमेशा we do expect कि all the people who are there out onto the podcasting directories या फिर social media पे हम उन्हें सुनना चाहिए हमें, but वैसे होता नहीं है. So there are few people who will be your super fans. There will be a certain set of people around your community who will be listening to each and every episode of yours. So, what is the importance of having that particular community, and in what way it influences the growth of the show?
Definitely helps, I think, and considering that a podcast is available on multiple audio consumption platforms, unlike, let's say, video, where, let's say, you consume and you make on the same platform, for example, YouTube, right? So, compared to that, podcasting is very different. And एक audience आपको जब किसी एक पर्टिकुलर प्लेटफॉर्म या किसी एक एरिया से या डेमोग्राफ से मिल रहा है, उसको एनालाइज करना जरूरी है, राइट? आई थिंक द इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ द कम्युनिटी इज, लाइक आई सेड, लाइक इफ आई गेट टू नो I've been made aware literally that there's an 11-year-old kid in Gurgaon who listens to my show, right? So he automatically becomes one part of that big community, right? So now I have to assume, even if I don't have any other, people in the same demographic, I have to assume that, okay, like you rightly said previously, that every time you post something, not just an episode, but an update about your progress or things that are happening, you it makes you feel part of whole, right? Because creative journey कभी कभार थोड़ी lonely भी हो सकती है कि जैसा पर्टिकुलरली होता है, जैसे पॉडकास्ट में हमने देखा है कि स्टार्टिंग में या किसी भी मीडियम में, व्हेन यू स्टार्ट एन इंस्टाग्राम पोस्ट और यूट्यूब चैनल, यू डोंट गेट मिलियन लिसन्स immediately, right? So there's a process to it. So in that journey, it is important to have those, that community. अब वो community चालू होगी 5 लोगों से, 5 से 10, 10 से 15, 15 से 5,000, ऐसे करके बढ़ेगी. And that is how it is. Like life में everything happens from small to big. It suddenly doesn't erupt, right? So, and of course, I'm keeping all the viral things aside. Like viral is once in a blue moon. So the natural trajectory for any content creator is a gradual trajectory. It's never highly exponential or very linear. So it's very gradual and goes with lots of ups and downs. So community ka pehla, like I said, one is it motivates you. It keeps you true to the goal that you started with. I think for me, the community also keeps me grounded. Like I said, when I get to know who all are listening, everybody, like mine is a slice of life story. So 11 साल के लड़के से लेकर 55, 60-year-old people are also listening. So it keeps me grounded that I have to create content for a very wide spectrum when I keep that in mind. So I cannot let myself fly in any random direction. So grounded in terms of thought process, in terms of content. So as a creator, humble रखता है मुझे कि भाई, there's a very wide audience. Third, it really helps you in creating and curating your content, right? So अगर मुझे पता है कि मेरा demograph ऐसा है, and I'm getting that demograph, right? Let's say if my target audience was XYZ age group, and fortunately I am able to target and reach that demograph, then you know what kind of content. I mean, I'm not even bringing the elements of monetization and all of that in picture because they add another layer of pros and cons and complexity to the entire model. But just to make you as a better creator and for your show to become a better show, I think the community really helps in that process.
I do agree, and thank you for keeping it raw and real, because then people want such kind of tips and tricks, because then everyone is chasing that monetization thing, viral thing. But वो आता है आएगा, it may take time, it may happen very soon. But again, उसका जो relatability factor होता है, जो graph होता है, it reaches to that particular peak, and then again वो ECG की तरह होता है, ऊपर नीचे types. तो उस factor को भी consider करो. So I do appreciate that. Now, you have talked about community creating, curating as well, but there remains an aspect once that show is out there with the audience. तो उसको market करने के लिए do you have any like unconventional techniques that you are following, ताकि जो audience कर रही है podcast, जो करना चाहती है, they might be able to follow that particular thing?
I'm actually the wrong person to ask that question because, like I said, like I am highly not tech savvy person. इनफैक्ट अगर पॉडकास्ट नहीं होता तो मेरा सोशल मीडिया प्रेजेंस नील हो चुका था अभी तक. आई डोंट नो व्हाट टू सजेस्ट ऑन दैट. सी माय अप्रोच इज अ लिटिल डिफरेंट एंड आई थिंक दैट्स प्योरली माय अप्रोच. जैसे आई एम नॉट अ वेरी लाउड अपना ही बुगुल खुद बजाने वाला आदमी. लाइक अपना ऐसा है कि ओके समथिंग हैपेंड, हियर इज एन अपडेट गाइस, दैट्स इट, डन. नाउ आई एम नॉट गोइंग, आई नेवर डिड दिस. लाइक आई सी a lot of Instagrammers, a lot of my friends who started like travel pages or even podcasts for that matter, they spammed their entire mailing, Instagram account. Like हर बंदे को हर हफ्ते का एक एक एपिसोड का लिंक आ रहा है. While that is, while there are like it's a double edged sword because आपको करनी चाहिए अपनी मार्केटिंग, राइट? अगर आप अपने बारे में अपनी बड़ाई नहीं करेंगे तो कौन करेगा, राइट? आप खुद अपने आप को नहीं बेचेंगे तो कौन बेचेगा? एट द सेम टाइम आई फेल्ट दैट इट डजंट कम नेचुरली टू मी. आई एम नॉट द काइंड ऑफ पर्सन जिसके मेरे पास एनर्जी नहीं है यार रोहित.
Same.
मेरे पास एनर्जी ही नहीं है कि भाई 1700 लोगों को मैं एक एक करके नहीं. अच्छा, अब somebody can say you can create a broadcast, so my response is भाई मैं इतना नॉन टेक savvy हूं कि मुझे पता ही नहीं था कि वो हो सकता है. I'll be honest, like when my initial podcast updates, I used to manually copy and send it to my entire WhatsApp list. I didn't know that there's a concept of broadcast. Now I am like, this may sound so stupid to somebody who's hearing this, but नहीं पता था यार. Like कभी यूज ही नहीं किया, जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ी, WhatsApp ग्रुप के आगे कभी गया ही नहीं मैं. तो मुझे पता ही नहीं ब्रॉडकास्ट लिस्ट भी होती है. तो फिर वन डे somebody said okay you can create a broadcast list. I said this is very good. So I created that list and I sent one episode. Then everybody's responding to me now individually. I said, what is this? Oh, this is not a group. Okay, so now the responses will come independently. So my approach, I think, comes from a little bit of me not being very tech savvy. मेरा ऐसा था कि ठीक है यार, मैंने इंस्टाग्राम फेसबुक सबको पेजेस को लिंक किया हुआ है. आई एम सो लेजी रोहित, लाइक माय फेसबुक एंड इंस्टाग्राम आर लिंक. सो आई पुट वन पोस्ट ऑन इंस्टाग्राम, वो ऑटोमेटिकली फेसबुक पे चला जाता है. I don't even put a separate post there or like anything for that matter. So my approach has been to keep it subtle, and I think that is because I am like that as a person. You will never see like I'm not dancing on trends. I'm not unnecessary creating content. A, because I don't have the bandwidth to do it from a time perspective. B, I'm not that kind of person. Like, I'm not a very show off, and I'm not a very attention seeking guy. कि देखो देखो मैं नाच रहा हूँ या देखो ये trend आ रहा है. I'm not like that. ठीक है. And thirdly, I think most importantly, which is my core philosophy in life, is your work should speak for who you are. So even in office, I am not the kind of person who plays politics and pulls other people down. मैं अपना काम ऊपर करने की कोशिश करता हूँ कि हाँ यार, मैं अपना आपको बेहतर कैसे करूं. तो लोग भी अभय को ऑफिस में भी एज दैट पर्सन जानते हैं जो खुद काम बहुत अच्छा करता है, राइट. एंड ओवर हेयर ऑल्सो माई फोकस हैज ऑल बीन कि यार ये रील करने से अच्छा, अगर मुझे मिला 1 घंटा वीकेंड पे, तो क्या मैं कोई कहानी बेहतर लिख सकता हूँ, क्या मैं ऑडियो एडिटिंग सीख सकता हूँ. इफ यू सी सम अर्ली ऑफ माई एपिसोड्स don't have a lot of sound effects. They just have some basic rhythm going on because that's what I knew at that time. Now, as and when I started getting more time out of my work, out of my other schedules, I started learning. I said, यार सीखते हैं ना थोड़ा. तो मेरा फोकस वहां है कि यार वो जो कंटेंट मैं बना रहा हूँ वो बेहतर कैसे हो. बिकॉज आई डोंट वांट दैट कि ऑडियंस आए मेरे शो पे और वो एक एपिसोड सुने. अब मैं नाच तो बहुत अच्छा रहा हूँ रील्स पे, लेकिन क्वालिटी ऑफ माई शो वेंट डाउन, राइट. So my more focus was there, and this is just me. And again, nothing against anybody who's doing those reels or trends. This is purely a personal preference where, because of my availability, interest, the kind of personality I am, my nature, I'm just not a very loud person. So we met on Creators Day, on Spotify Creators Day, the two of us. I just came back, I put one post, I said, Spotify Creators Day was an amazing journey. I just wrote what I felt, and that's it. I'd never reshared that. I never spammed people about it. Okay, उस पे 2 लाइक आएगा तो भी चलेगा, 0 लाइक आएगा तो भी चलेगा. Because I wrote it because I had to. Like I felt nice, and I was like, ठीक है डालते हैं. That's it. But it wasn't there to grab people's attention and about the numbers के भाई like ही like चाहिए, के follower ही follower चाहिए. If you see a lot of good podcasters only, they don't have a lot of followers. So but they're very good in their content creation because their entire energy, and I learned from some of them, that focus your entire energy on the thing that really matters, because your account could be the best account with like million followers, but if your content is not good, nobody cares. That is my philosophy.
Exactly. I could relate the way you are creating your podcast because even I don't get a lot of time to create something that मतलब कहते हैं ना फुल टाइम थिंग नहीं है वो कि चलो सुबह से लेके कुछ लिख लिया फिर रिकॉर्ड कर लिया एडिट कर लिया ग्राफिक्स बना लिया पब्लिश कर लिया ये सारी चीज़ें दिन में नहीं होती है सो वट एवर एम्पल टाइम आई गेट आई जस्ट सी कि हाँ इसको मैं क्रिएटिव वे में करूँ ताकि आई फील बेटर आई कैन पुट आउट माई वॉइस टू द ऑडियंस एंड आई फील दैट कि वॉइस के साथ रिलेटिबिलिटी ज़्यादा बढ़ती है इट इज़ द वॉइस एंड आई ऑफन गेट कॉम्प्लीमेंट फॉर माई वॉइस एज वेल मतलब कि जैसे आपने कहा कि यार हाँ, आपकी आवाज़ अच्छी है तो मेरे साथ भी वैसे ही होता है कि पीपल जस्ट कीप मी सेंडिंग मैसेजेस कि यार यू साउंड गुड एट दैट पर्टिकुलर पॉडकास्ट सो दैट इज समथिंग दैट यू शुड ऑलवेज बी स्ट्राइविंग फॉर बिकॉज देन कि ठीक है ये वायरलिटी लाइक्स वैनिटी मेट्रिक्स हो जाते हैं बट देन अगेन इफ यू आर एंजॉइंग वॉट यू आर क्रिएटिंग फॉर योर ओन शो दैट इज अगेन द टेस्टामेंट कि हाँ यू विल बी डूइंग गुड एंड यू विल बी क्रिएटिंग इट फॉर द लॉन्गर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम तो वो लॉन्जेटिविटी चाहिए हमें दैट इज समथिंग वी ऑल आर स्ट्राइविंग फॉर
And made with heart and like with a lot of passion, that content is always there, right? Some of the stand-up comedians who made some content like 5 years ago, unki clips aaj bhi chal rahi hain because they made it with passion. And that content is, मतलब मैं बहुत ही एक्सट्रीम एग्जांपल यूज कर रहा हूँ. इट्स लाइक लता मंगेशकर की आवाज यार, विच इज टाइमलेस. सो आप अगर ये सोच के चलोगे कि मुझे करंट टाइम को एड्रेस करना है, तो आपका कंटेंट भी वैसा होगा. आप ये सोच के चलोगे कि यार मैं चला भी गया और उसके बाद भी ये कंटेंट जमता रहे, तो वो आपके हर जगह रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा. और इन जनरल तो मुझे लाइव में क्लटर पसंद नहीं है, तो मेरा इंस्टाग्राम पेज और सोशल मीडिया बड़ा डीक्लटर्ड सा है कि हाँ ठीक है, एक 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 किस्से का एक ही वो है, मतलब एक ही पोस्ट है. हम स्पॉटिफाई क्रिएटर्स डे पे गए तो हमने एक ही पोस्ट डाला, भाई ठीक है, एक दिन का एक पोस्ट
हाँ।
है। अब अगली बार मैं रोहित से मिलूंगा तो उसका भी एक ही पोस्ट आ जाएगा, भाई ठीक है,
कब मिलना है अभय?
बस मिलते हैं जल्दी।
बिल्कुल। So coming on to the last part of this episode, Abhay, how do you see the Indian podcasting space growing in coming future? And if you have to give one tip to the fellow podcasters who are just starting out, what would be?
See, the ecosystem definitely is going to grow. Reason why I say is, of course, there are a lot of thought leadership reports, materials, which are published by much more renowned and better thought leaders than me, and bigger brands, companies like Spotify, JioSaavn. They have all published a lot of reports and trends. But even if I look at it from a common sense and a logical perspective, right, where the podcast was introduced, it's not a new concept. It's new to India as a market, but it's been there in existence for about, I think, 20 years, like 15, 20 years, right? We recently celebrated, I think, a 20th year or something like that. So, 20 साल में that industry has matured so much in the West, right? Where you see the type of content, and there is so much opportunity even for independent creators like you and me to monetize and things like that. So it's become what YouTube is now. In 20 years is exactly what podcasting is also there in the West in 20 years. So अगर यहाँ पे बड़े बेट्स नहीं भी लगते इंडिया में, तो भी फॉर इंडिपेंडेंट क्रिएटर्स दैट एंटायर स्पेक्ट्रम इज ओपन। ये मेरा मानना है, राइट? अगर आप जस्ट वेस्ट को देखो कि उन्होंने चालू किया, थोड़ा बहुत लोगों ने चालू किया और फिर कंजम्पशन पैटर्न एकदम वो हो गया, तो वो चीज़ यहाँ भी आएगी। अब वो टेक्नोलॉजी बनाने की और नो हाउ और वो सब चीज़ें यहाँ आई, तो यहाँ भी वो चीज़ एक्सप्लोर होगी ही होगी। यहाँ का बेनिफिट जो है, वो ये है कि वी आर लाइक सच अ स्ट्रॉन्ग नेशन विद अ वेराइटी ऑफ टॉपिक्स एंड वेराइटी ऑफ लैंग्वेजेस. So I am comfortable if I'm a Malayali guy and I want to talk about, let's say, some issues happening in only my community. Nobody's going to stop me, right? And the another good part is that we are also spread across the globe. So the Malayali audience, or let's say a native language audience, is no longer confined within India. They are there present across the globe. So I think there is a lot of potential. This is just my personal view in terms of what it would be. The numbers definitely, match this thing, and there are various ways. So podcast has evolved into a vodcast also now. A lot of video podcasts are now moving to audio, and conversation is one aspect, right? You and narrative storytelling is just one. I have not seen a lot of podcast on research side, so a lot of history. There's a podcast called History Chatter, India Unveils. So udhar ka pura genre baki hai. Now imagine, let's say, somebody who is a PhD in a particular topic, let's say in culture or history, they start a podcast either on their own or with a production company, right? It's as good as a discovery show, right? कि discovery और nat geo पे अगर वो show आ रहा है, it's as good as that. So we have just not even touched the iceberg, I would say. I think we have just introduced the concept where the audience is in building stage. At this moment, like, an advice for budding podcasters is right time to jump in my opinion, right? If you are looking for a medium to grow and work upon, I think this is a good time to jump in. You can try, explore. If you like this, you can build an audience here. And there are different ways, like it doesn't have to limit to audio. You can start a video podcast or a video series. I mean, it's a good medium. It is going to grow. And just have faith, like we discussed earlier in this conversation, that 5 से 10, 10 से 15, 15 से 5,000 बनने में टाइम लगेगा, तो वो कहीं भी होगा। अगर आप इंस्टाग्राम भी जाओगे तो भी होगा, यूट्यूब जाओगे तो भी होगा। यू कैन नॉट bypass that stage. But if you have patience, you will find your audience, and that audience will come. When the audience will come, then loyal followers will come. When loyal followers will come, the metrics and statistics already automatically become better. That automatically leads to better monetization and overall widespread brand building, everything. But it's a game of patience at the end. So patient रहो। और हाँ, लास्ट चीज ये कि जेन्युइनली जो करोगे और दिल से करोगे तो वो अच्छा रहेगा। तो आस्क योरसेल्फ, व्हाट इज द गोल, व्हाई आर यू डूइंग दिस, एंड proceed wholeheartedly with that goal. And then I'm hopeful, and I pray that success follows you in those steps.
Great. Abhay, I would just like sum up with one word or one sentence like कि honest learnings मिली है मुझे इस episode से, because that is what is expected. क्योंकि anyone, everyone who is listening to us is looking out for some kind of a comfort कि यार इनकी journey कैसे रही है, ये कैसे कर रहे हैं, what are the ways of growing, what are the challenges they are facing, and if you are able to answer them in a very honest way कि यार यही है journey, मैं कुछ ऐसे superficial चीज़ें नहीं कर रहा हूँ, मैं कुछ बड़ा चढ़ा के नहीं बोल रहा हूँ, दैट इज व्हाट पीपल आर एक्सपेक्टिंग, एंड दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई दिस शो एग्जिस्ट इन फर्स्ट प्लेस, इंडियन पॉडकास्टिंग रेवोल्यूशन। क्योंकि ये रेवोल्यूशन आ रहा है, वी वांट टू ब्रिंग इट, वी वांट टू ब्रिंग सम काइंड ऑफ स्टोरीज, ताकि हम जो कह रहे हैं ना वो किसी से इंस्पायर होके आए. And we want that kind of a medium. That is the reason we are trying to do best to offer something to the community, something to the Indian podcasters. So thank you for sharing those kind of honest learnings with us, and it has been a great conversation with you. I hope that people will be able to relate with each and every word that you said, and they will be tuning to your podcast as well. आप ऐसी ही कहानियाँ बनाते रहिए, हम सुनते रहेंगे, और उसके बारे में कहते हैं ना कि कॉम्प्लीमेंट्स, अभिप्राय हम देते रहेंगे. सो अगेन, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर बीइंग ऑन इंडियन पॉडकास्टिंग रेवोल्यूशन. इट वाज़ प्लेजर टू होस्ट यू.
Thank you, Rohit. I had a great fun talking with you. Thank you so much. And yeah, hoping for a revolution in this space in the coming time.
Definitely, and we all are the contributors for the same. So let's hope for the best. We hope you have liked the podcast episode we have had today on PodPeeps. By the way, if you want to join Podcasters community, fill the form from link in the show notes. And yes, thank you so much for being here today. Do send us a DM on Instagram at DFY Podcast if you follow Indian Podcasting Revolution. And if you are yet to follow, what are you waiting for? Follow it now and join us next week for yet another episode. This is your host Rohit, signing off.